Okay, that's our Q232. We're going to get started, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar on the CPFA individual student collection. We appreciate you taking the time out of this Friday afternoon. I know it's a beautiful afternoon, so thank you for coming. My name is Abe Christ from the Performance Office at the CSDE, and we only have about an hour today, so we're going to get rolling and jump right into things here. A couple tips for the webinar to make the next hour a success. Please keep in mind that we have everyone who's attending on mute for the duration of the webinar. The presentation the presenters will not be consistently monitoring the chat, except during two brief question periods when we'll address any incoming questions. If we don't get to your question, you can certainly email us. We have our contact information at the end of the slide deck. So again, we will be taking questions via the chat only during the short question periods. This session is being recorded, so if you need to turn it over to your colleagues, it will be on the CPFA individual student collection page in a few days. And a PDF is in the chat right now. Forgot to do that, so I can do two things at once here. So next thing up, our presenters today, again, as I mentioned, my name's Abe Christ. I'm also joined by my colleague Ray Martin, education consultant in the Performance Office. Hi, Ray. And then also our special guests from Wallingford Public Schools, Karen Vayu, and then Westport Public Schools, Chris Anako. Thanks both Chris and Karen for attending today. They're going to touch on the Power School aspect of the CPFA individual student collection. So the agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about the basics, then we're going to hit the system that probably many of you are aware of, how to load and enter data, to touch on what the file looks like, and then after that, a Power School demonstration. We're going to try to spend about 35 minutes on the CPFA app, then take 5 minutes of questions, then 15 minutes on the Power School app, and then back to about 5 minutes of questions. So we're going to try to wrap up in about an hour. Okay, so why are we here today? We're just taking a new approach to this collection, and there's three things really driving this effort. Number one is to improve the overall quality of the data collected. It's obvious that when you're collecting at the individual level, it does improve the quality. It also is going to allow us to, and we'll expand on this later in the presentation, for more accurate handling of special circumstances when it comes to accountability calculations. And then finally, to comply with ESSA requirements. So it is an ESSA requirement to do this, so that's really the primary reason why this is being taken on. Okay, we're just going to come out right away and address the due dates just because they are important. By July 6th, all data must be processed into the database, which means it has to be loaded without errors and transferred into the database. Ray's going to touch on that, how to do that in a few minutes. And then by July 21st, that is our freeze date. So no data changes or submissions will be accepted after this date. And I want to emphasize that for a couple reasons this year, that is a super hard date. We don't plan on bumping that out at all, so please keep that on your calendar as really absolute hard dates. And then finally, at the end of August, the data that has been submitted is going to be available on EdSite. The plan is to get this up on EdSite. It's a common question. How about resources? There are available resources up to this point. You can hit this link off the PDF in the chat. It's going to take you to the CPFA individual student collection page where you'll be able to find the test admin manual, the sample template, the collection user's guide, and the school and district code lookup. This is the page where we're going to add the recording and as well as the PDF of this. I'll probably put the PDF up there later today. If you need the recording, it will be there probably sometime early next week, and we can always email you all who attended the webinar that it is up there. Okay, I'm going to pass the baton over to Ray, who's going to take over to tell us a little bit about the system. Ray?
Thank you, Abe, and thank you all for coming. I know it's hard on a Friday afternoon to have a training or any kind of meeting on a Friday afternoon. Um, the new CPFA system resides in the our department's data collection portal. That's the new portal. Some of you work on PSIS and as in the legacy portal, at least for now. And so that's a different system. This is a new portal that we've been using for a number of. It's kind of weird to call it the new, but it's newer than the legacy portal. It's at the web address there, the https://csde.ct.gov. Access to that site is managed by a system called Directory Manager, which your LEA security manager for your district will manage. That person has the ability to grant access, take away access, create new users, and so forth. So if you are somebody who's here who doesn't have a portal account, you just talk to your security manager to actually get in there, get the access, because you'll need that access to be able to log into the system and do the data entry. So the system is designed to collect data in two basic ways. One is a batch upload, which is you use, files that you take a big file of information, uploading it all at once. This is the primary method. I think 99 or 95% of the districts will be using. But there is also a manual entry one, which in some people may use to actually augment their batch upload. If you have, if you upload all your data, you had 2 errors and you deleted those records, and now you just need to enter 2 extra students, it may be easier than making a batch. So that may be something you use. Now, this system was designed with consultation with our physical education and health expert group that we have brought here that consults with us. I know some of the members are here today. We also consulted with PowerSchool Infinite Campus. I know there was a comment that not everyone uses PowerSchool. It is the most common SIS system in the state by far, but we understand there are others. We spoke to Infinite Campus, and we also created the system. Again, that's one of the reasons we had manual entry, so certain people can actually go and use stuff and not actually be tied to one of those SIS systems. So there are 2 key roles that are there for this system. The first one is the CPFA LEA certifier. That person has to be a certified administrator, but they're able to enter, view reports, and certify data. We are not thinking we'll be doing certification this year. We're just trying to, first year, trying to get everyone just to be able to get to be able to crawl first before we ask them to walk. So we're gonna probably hold that off till next year. And then this CPFA LEA writer. It is basically that person can view reports and enter data, and that's about it. It is not designed. The system is not designed for these roles to be school level people. This is a district. It was designed at a district level. There aren't roles down to the school level, so you can't. If a school level person has a role, they can enter data for the whole for everyone in your district, and also see data for everyone in your district. So that which may not be appropriate. So the actual process of actually data entering is actually a 3-step process. The first is entry of the data either through a batch upload or through the manual upload. There's a validation where the system looks at the data and says, okay, is there errors with it? Did you give us a student we did not expect for your district or for that school? And then the question then, if it has errors, you have to go back and you fix the errors in the data system itself or delete the batch and then reload. And then when you have no errors, you can process the batch into the database. It's important to note only data that have been processed count as will be loaded into the database, and those are the only data we're going to use. So if you've loaded, 1,000 records, validated, and they all have validated with no errors, and it becomes July 22nd, and we pass the freeze date, those records will not count. They have to be processed into the database. If they're not in the process status, they don't count because we can't tell if you were going to go in later and change them all. So that's the rules on that. So again, when you go to the system, the first page you're gonna get is just like a welcome screen. It does have some access to certain, there's links and so forth, but the main page you're going to use is actually the data entry and file upload page. This page has links to the template if you need that to be able to load up, the user guide, which is also on the help site that Abe talked about, and has the ability for you to upload or create. You can either upload a file or create a manual entry. So if you whichever one you're doing, that's going to be the way you go. You click on the individual buttons on this page. Now, if you're doing a manual entry, you'll click on a button that says create manual batch, and then you will, when you create the manual batch, you'll actually click the details button for that actual batch, which will then allow you to add records to a batch, either an existing batch or create a brand new batch. Until you're processed, if you are creating a manual batch, you can just keep on adding records to that batch and then load it all at once. You don't have to create a new batch for every single student who you add to the system. Or, if you're adding a manual record, this is the page you will see. It actually, you have to put in the student's SACID. The reporting district will be auto-filled for the district that you've logged in as a member of. In this case, this was a test account, and the person was logging in as Ansonia. So that will automatically filled. There's a district student ID field. That's a optional field. If you want to put it in, you can. If you don't, you do need to put the student's date of birth, the school/program where the test was administered, an assessment code. That is basically what assessment are you reporting the results of, and then a result code. Now, the assessment code, there's the school program, and the assessment result code all come from drop-down lists, so you are limited to the options on those pages. You can't create a new physical fitness test that's not part of the CPFA. You just only those options there. So if you're going to do a batch upload, there are specific file specifications. They're on the screen. They're available on our help site. The file upload has one column for SACID, one for reporting district, student district ID. Again, that's optional. Date of birth, program, assessment type, assessment result, and then a end of record marker, which is an X for all records. There's the different result code, the different test codes, what they are. So it allows us to tell you have the sit and reach, the curl up, the pull up, and then there's 3 different types of aerobic that you only submit one result for, either the mile run, the pacer 20-meter, or the 15-meter pacer. And then there's the different types of assessment results, most of which you'll be either 1, 2, or 3, which are needs improvement, the health fitness zone, or the high fitness zone. This is all gonna be on the help site, and so you can download those at your leisure. It's important to note that according to following current practice for the department, this application is using the full 7-digit district code, not the 3-digit that some of the older legacy applications use. So that's the full digit. So if you're used to using the 3-digit code like PSIS uses, that 3-digit district code in other parlance is actually also referred to as town code. And that will, I just realized that is misspelled. It's supposed to be town code, not down code on that slide. And then it depends on, so if you are Hartford, your town code is 06064, then the rest of the code would be 00. Everyone has the school code of 00 for this application for a district, and then their institution code. And then the different institution codes depend on the type of or district you are. If you're regional, it's a 12 and so forth. So this is available here. There is also a lookup feature on the help site, it brings you to ed site, find district, and then you can just look up your district and find the actual district code for your individual district. So, and then, so the actual uploading of a file that you've created a file has to be a CSV, comma separated value file. That is one of the save as options inside Excel. So you'd use that. But the process basically is very, you start on the upload page, but it's basically like you're attaching a file to an email. You click on the upload, you click on the choose file button that's right above where the green box is that the arrow's pointed to on the screen. And then it opens the page. You find the file like you're going to attach it. You click it, open file. And then after that file is attached and it's chosen, you click on the upload. It will then ask you, okay, the file you're uploading, does it have a header row or not? Because if you have a header row, it wants to ignore that and not and load the file, but not actually test that row for data. If you do not have one, you click that and then it includes that row, so that way it doesn't end up giving you an error every time you any file for your header row, because your header row doesn't have a SACID in it. So you want to check that going forward. So when you load it and you've gone through that point when you validate, it validates the file. It will actually tell you, hey, you have X number if you have errors, if you have no errors, after it's looked at your file. And then it will show up on the roster of different uploads and batches you have in the file. If you want to go view that one, you click on the details button. That will allow you to go into the actual batch you have and see if you have errors. It'll default right to records with errors and it'll lay them all out. This is this student, you already have a record for this student for this test. If you have a code that does not match the format, that will then show up. So if you reported, an assessment and you had ABC as the assessment type, well, that's not one of the assessment types that we have. So it's going to say, hold a second, we don't recognize that test, and have an error. So you'll see those and be able to actually go and click on, you'll be able to choose, do I want to keep that record in that batch? If I do, I can fix it by clicking the edit button, or I can just delete that record. So if you have 500 records with one that's wrong, you might decide, I'm just going to write down which one is an error, delete that one, and then proceed to actually revalidate the file and then make the fix, and then just worry about that one record later, just to get that file, that one batch done. As you go through, if you're going to edit the file, you're going to come through and it's just going to come in. It's going to preload all of the data that matches the format, and then just have that one piece of data that doesn't actually match. In the case of this, the assessment type did not match. So it says, okay, we don't know what assessment type you thought this was, but it did not match one of the codes that we actually have. So then with the drop down, you can say it was meant to be this test, save that, and then you'll be able to revalidate the batch, which will then allow the error to get cleared. Now, if you have 10 things out of a file you need to fix, you can fix all of those and then revalidate the batch, and that's fine. But you have to revalidate the batch, or it won't actually get to the point where you can actually process it. So that's that. So when you get to the point where you actually have 0 errors on a batch, have no errors, and you think you're ready to process it, it'll have a status of validated without errors and an error count of 0. You can then process the batch. Once that has happened, that data is set and it's in our database, you cannot come back later and say, whoops, I want to change that needs improvement score for student X to a high fitness zone. Once it's in the database, it's done. It's in. Um, and as again, important as we mentioned before, only data that are processed into the assessment database are counted as being fully submitted and therefore used for state purposes. So if you're concerned about, your accountability participation rate, you need to make sure all the records actually get all the way into the process mode. Yes, since I just saw one question, yes, you can have as many different batches as you want. We have people who have processed school by school, and we have others who have literally had just like I had one person who did one test batch. They put a one record batch in, and that was just a test, and they went forward and just to see how it worked, and it worked fine for them. So now there are a number of reports that we have available for the system. They are designed for a couple different reasons. Some of it is just for you to find out, hey, what do we have in, what do we not have in? Which at a school level can become very important if you're trying to figure out, hey, we have 100 kids that are supposed to get tested at school X, and only 50 have been tested. Which ones have been tested? Which ones do we need to test? So you can look in those and check by statuses and say, okay, there's this. If you have data that haven't been processed and then you later want to know, hold a second, what did we put down for this student? You can go into the process report and actually see what the results have been submitted for that student. So you're able to identify what you have. Nate, this comes into big play is if you've loaded a file, you got busy, and then you try to reload that file and you get an error. Hey, we already have records for this. And you want to confirm, hold a second, am I just trying to reload the same file I've already done? If you look at the processed batch, it'll say, oh, hold a second, you have records for these students and these are the scores. So you should be able to kind of cross check and figure out, okay, that file we already loaded, so we don't need to load it again. You can't load it again because those data have been submitted. So there's a whole bunch of different reports. Most of them are going to be able to be filtered by school, by grade. So you can, on the school reports, you can get down to saying, hey, I want to know about students in 4th grade, 6th grade, however. This becomes really important at the high school level because with the CPFA, students can be tested at any grade during their high school career, so if you are a school that primarily tests kids in 11th grade, you can go into the report and just see how the status of kids are at the 11th grade. So you maybe find the kids who you still need to test. So that way, instead of looking at a whole school where if you're only testing one grade, but this because any kid can be tested, if you don't filter by grade at the high school level, you're going to have a whole bunch of records that don't apply. So it allows you then to focus down onto the individual grade that you actually work with. So those are some of the things you want to look at. But again, as you go through, you'll be able to work with that. So, and now we can move to any questions. You have anything there, Abe?
Yeah, Ray, so I think I didn't listen to my own parameters on the webinar. I couldn't resist and I was keeping up with the questions, but yeah, a couple have been loaded in here. How do we know if all the data is uploaded successfully? I think Ray touched on that you would use the reports that Ray's referencing. Next question that came in is, what if the 11th and 12th graders have been tested in previous years? Ray, you want to touch on that one, the high school one?
Yeah. So this year we're basically going to be taking whatever because we don't have individual records, and we're not going to be saying they will be in the system as not having a result. But you know that situation where, hey, if if all your 11th and 12th graders, have already would have been or been tested in past years, you only need to focus on whatever grade you're testing in either your ninth or 10th, and just filter for that at your high school to figure out who you need in the grade you choose to test in. Um, so it's not as easy. You will have to be kind of mindful of, okay, the high school tests at X grade. I will need to filter the report on that so I can look at just that one grade to see where we're missing stuff. When it comes to accountability, and that may be some of what you're thinking of, um, we use for accountability, the participation rate is all the students' records that we get at your high school. So if you test in ninth grade, 11th grade, 10th grade, at some point, if you upload a result for a student, that student's participation rate is going to be compared. The denominator of that is the 10th grade June PSIS. So we're going to be it's 10th grade for participation rate for the denominator, regardless of, if it's an 11th grade, you guys test at the 11th grade or at the ninth grade. That's just how the system is designed. And we have to, you know, that's how it's been the rule since we moved to freeing up kids to test at any grade. Abe?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Next one came in from Sue. Which PSIS collection, or where are we pulling the data from? And yeah, you're correct, Sue. We're pulling it from a PSIS reg. So that's where it's coming from. Then another follow-up, does that mean elementary data does not have to be uploaded, then only high school? Ray, since you started that off, I could answer that, but you go ahead and finish that one or respond to that.
No, not at all. 4, 6, 8, and the high school, I was only talking about high school a little different because 4, 6, and 8, those are required grades. At high school, they have the flexibility to test students at any time during their high school career. You don't have that flexibility at elementary grades. You need to actually test those kids in 4, 6, and 8, and they have to be uploaded as well. Anything else, Abe?
So another question came in. Please help explain code 11. So I think this is a reference to the Excel spreadsheet where students, Ray, I'll take this one and you could probably add to it, but students who are participated but not held to a gender-based standard. So those would be a student who participated in the standard assessment, but is using a customized or personalized standards for the assessment. Ray, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. So in the case when you have a student who's not held to the state-based standard is when you have a student who's non-binary, who chooses not to be held to a gender-based standard. This happens, the way it's supposed to happen with a student who's non-binary. They're supposed to be offered the opportunity to be held to either gender standard or no standard at all. If they're not held to that standard, they cannot be considered having passed all 4, but we wanted them to be able to count it as participating. So they're supposed to work with their PE instructor to establish goals for themselves. And then if they actually take all 4 assessments, you report them as not being held to a state standard, but participating. That allows them, if they've done it for all 4 assessments, to be counted as a participant. So we can help the accountability participation rate.
Thanks, Ray. So another question, if the student exited from the district before the end of the school year, do we still need to report them?
Ideally, you're not actually required to actually do that, because they're not going to be in your denominator. But if you fully assess them, if it's a May change, you may want to do it anyway, because the next district may not have the opportunity to actually assess them. So that student's results do get entered in, and so but we're not going to, hold a gun to anyone's head on that one. Okay. Anything else, Abe, or do you want to pass it over?
Next one came in about troubleshooting from Chris. Chris, you can, our contact information is at the back of the slide deck, so you can email Ray or myself or the CT student assessment at ct.gov inbox. Any of those will see it. And then I guess we could take one more here from Elisa. So I see in my data collection, hold on one second. See my data collection sheet, which was provided to me via Excel. I see the mile run plus the pacer 15 and 20. I do not want to ruin the spreadsheet by entering zeros in the tests I do not use. Is this going to be okay?
I'm not sure I fully understand, but I think, okay, if what you're asking is, what will happen if if you do not, if you have a student who did not take an assessment, and you don't want to say, if we do not get a record for a student, it will be assumed that the student either did not participate or refused. So if you have a situation where, you have a student who wasn't assessed and you don't load something, you're going to end up with the same result in the system. So, I don't think, if it's going to make difficulty on your side for a student who didn't take it, then not uploading it isn't going to cause us a problem. It's not going to be a data change. It's going to be a zero did not participate on either way. So, all right.
Okay, I think Ray, I think we're even on the questions at the moment. So,
okay.
Sorry, I'm being distracted by the chat here. I apologize. We'll get back to you. If you guys chat in, we'll try to catch up with the chat, but we're going to pass the baton to our colleagues, Karen and Chris from Westport and Wallingford, who are special guests. Thanks so much for coming to kind of tell us a little bit about the PowerSchool entry method. And we are aware, I saw a chat come in that there are other ways to do this. You can do it manually or with the other SISs, but the reason we're asked Karen and Chris to come here because that is the predominant SIS that's used by you all. So anyways, Karen, Chris.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start and then Chris is going to take over. Let's see if I can. So is that coming out okay?
Yep, looks good,
okay.
Karen.
Okay, great. I wanted to mention too, as Abe just stated, even if you have PowerSchool, you're not required to use this, but it is now built-in functionality inside PowerSchool. You could always create a spreadsheet and upload it, as Ray has demonstrated earlier. So inside PowerSchool, if you choose to keep the scores in there, there is a few pieces of setup. The very first thing is you do have to execute the setup. If you've done it a very long time ago, you can do it again and it will reseed any tests if you missed. There have been many changes, so if you've done it in January, you might want to do this step again.
And just to add to that, this is something, reseeding the tables is something that you should do every time a state reporting update comes out. In fact, sometimes it's mentioned as a requirement in the release notes, and it just keeps some of the code sets and grade scales up to date with the current standards. So I know personally, I do that every time a new state reporting update comes out. And then once you see the tables, you need to enable fitness testing on individual courses. And to do that, you would go to district setup and click on courses. From there, you can filter out if you want to just have the PE related classes or whatever scheduling, whatever department code is used internally in your district, to narrow it down to just the PE classes. And then you can sit with your athletic director to choose which courses specifically will be using the fitness testing on. And you'll just check this little box and hit submit. And then in PowerTeacher or the PowerSchool teacher portal, you'll see this little stopwatch icon show up for those enabled courses on the teacher side.
And if you don't see the stopwatch, you may have custom code. So that was a question a couple of times. So that's something to keep in mind. Teachers are going to then be able to click on the stopwatch and enter scores based on a test date. It does have logic built in. Based on the test date, it will check the child's age and give the appropriate score for the child's age, the date of the test. So you do want to record the actual date that the test was administered. So they would pick the test type and the date, and they would have a list of their students, and they can put in the result.
And it's really important that we keep the test date for each student as the actual date that they were tested, because as Karen mentioned, the student's age is calculated based off of that date. And in some cases, if you're using a blanket date for all students, the student there were some issues with enrollment where the test date was before they enrolled and it was causing errors during the upload. So it's important to use the actual date the student was tested. And in PowerTeacher, once you click the student's name, you'll come up with this little flyout window where the test type will be pre-populated from the previous window, the test date, and then under result, that's where you're actually putting the result of how the student performed during the test. And underneath that, where it says score, at this point it says not available, but if you were to enter a score, it will automatically calculate whether or not the score needs improvement, health fitness zone, or high health performance. The last option is if you need to submit a score override, you would not put anything into the result box, and you would select one of the 6 score overrides that we'll talk about on the next slide. And if your teachers are not able to see the fall or S1 classes, if you go into district setup under miscellaneous, you should be able to change it to the full reporting term, and then you should be able to see the data.
So let's talk about score overrides. These are the explanations for the score overrides. All of them in PowerSchool will now start with CT. Your teachers will see some additional score overrides, which caused a lot of confusion, but they are built in PowerSchool codes and we're unable to remove them. However, you can tell your teachers now to just use the CT overrides. In addition, a new feature is there's a little eye with like the bubble that's shown on the top, the little blue bubble with the eye in it. And if teachers can see this and on the admin side, if they hover, they will see these explanations for each score. So they don't have to get out their little cheat sheets of which score to use when. So hopefully that will be helpful. That was in a recent release. So that's, I definitely wanted to mention that.
And so we covered the method of entering scores by pressing the timer stopwatch icon, which is useful when you're testing a whole group of students at once. But using this method that I'm about to explain, you can enter scores for a student. Let's say if they need to do a makeup, or if they were absent, or they were out ill and had to be tested on on another date, whatever the case may be. So in the PowerSchool teacher portal, instead of clicking that stopwatch icon, you can click the information icon, which looks like that little contact. It looks like the icon that's on the current slide. You can choose the student from the list on the left-hand side. And then from there, in the upper right, there's going to be a drop down that says select screens, and you would choose fitness on that and add a score that way. And then the process to add this score, it looks exactly the same as the other menu that we showed previously. And all student tests that the student took, regardless of date, will show in that list. So if someone took a test on October 3rd and a different test on January 2nd, regardless of date, they will show in that list for you to confirm.
So this is also viewable on the administrative side of PowerSchool. So if a principal or department head had access to this, they would see the individual score that a teacher had entered. The same method.
And this is a feature that was released within the last few months, a way to validate your data or at least check to see students who have never taken the CPFA, any of the tests in the test suite. If you were to go to the admin start page and in the left-hand navigation bar, choose special functions, you'll find manage fitness data. And from there, you can filter on the school or the start date or the end date or the grade, or you can search all records. And from there, any student that appears in that list is a student that does not have any fitness data. It's important that you're not including grades that we're not pulling data for. So if you see a 5th grader and we're only testing 4, 6, 8, and in my district, 10th grade, if I see a 5th grader, well, I just need to ignore that. So any student that in that list does not have any fitness data.
So then when you're ready, you could either validate or actually submit data to the state by creating the report, which will create the file that will then be uploaded to the state. You do have to run this school by school. It cannot be run at the district level. So if you're not getting any results, make sure you're in a school before running this.
And then once you've switched to the school, in the left-hand navigation bar, you would go to System Reports, and under State, you'll find the CPFA report. The enrollment snapshot date, you should choose the last day of school because it will pick up anyone who was active on the last day of school or before. Display headers, that's completely optional. And as Ray and Abe mentioned, there's an option in the state portal to not pick up that header row. So that's completely up to you. So extract format, yes, that should be comma delimited. The report execution mode. So if you started the CPFA setup at the beginning of the year, this option wasn't present. By default, it would run in submission mode. So as you ran this report, it would give you all students since you ran the report the last time. So if you kept running it, eventually there would be no more students because you ran the report and all the students had already been reported. So recently there was a validation mode that was added to the report that will give you all records at once. And personally, that's the option I will be using. I'm making sure with my athletic director that all of the data is in PowerSchool. I'll run it in validation mode. I'll get all of the results and then upload that to the state to be verified.
Yeah, and it's really important. And we're going to talk about this too, that you're on the most recent version of state reporting, but we'll hold off on that for now. So this is the sample CSV data. This is right from the help site, from the CPFA help site. PowerSchool should generate the report exactly like this. A known issue is right now the reporting district is only pulling the 3-digit number, which would be the first 3 digits. And they've been notified of this and it should be fixed soon. So I did want to point that out. If you had to, you could manually append that if you wanted to get your files done before it's fixed by PowerSchool.
And so depending on the mode you've selected, you'll export the report and then you'll bring this into the state portal. Just as Ray mentioned, you go through the flow chart and upload the data and it'll give you back any rows that have errors, if any. And of course, we discussed certifying the data and how that's optional. So, so basically PowerSchool is just your unified interface for your teachers to add their data. PowerSchool generates the CSV, you upload it to the state and verify it.
So known issues. There have been many fixes that have already gone out and installed. To be honest, there's been changes almost every state reporting update. So again, make sure you're on the latest up-to-date version of Connecticut state reporting. A few of the latest issues we've had that have been fixed. One is, that should say the curl ups. The curl ups originally had the number per minute in the verbiage. The table was correct. It was calculating the correct number. However, it really is the total number of repetitions in 3 minutes or in the time that child tested. And so that has been fixed. The sit and reach, also the score was pulling incorrectly. That has been fixed. And I believe if you previously did data entry, there is a script that will fix any stored with the incorrect one. For example, if it's stored needs, it's not needs, is it needs improvement? Yeah, needs improvement zone, and it should have been the health fitness zone. It'll correct that. The still outstanding is what I mentioned earlier. We know that they have to fix the school ID to the 7-digit number, which actually we do not store anywhere in PowerSchool at this point in time. So that's why it became a bigger discussion of where it should be stored, and is this like going to be needed for other reports or just this one report. So we are working on that. PowerSchool is aware of that. So you can get any detailed information from the release notes on the PowerSchool help site.
And any information relating to the CPFA can be reached through the help site at the state through this link.
I guess, do we have any questions about this presentation or this part of it? Let's see.
Yeah, Karen, there's a couple there. Rather than me translating them for you, maybe
Okay.
there's one from Jen. Can you see that one?
Yep. Special budget manager seems to only pull students who haven't tested at all, not miss. So, okay, so the question is the report of looking for students who haven't been tested. I think what you're saying is, let's just say they took the curl up but didn't do any other tests. It's not going to show that student because it's considering that they did get tested in something. So if we're looking for more detail, I guess we would have to take that under consideration. I do want to also mention that if you have SQL reports or you use SQL reports, you can install reports so your teachers can run them, or you can run them yourself on the admin side also and really see who's missing or how far along you are with that data. Let's see.
And just to add on to that, the convenient thing about that is I'm using the SQL queries that I believe Stephanie Kilburn from our NEPUG group posted. And as the teacher, if you change the current selection and you say yes, it'll show only the teacher's students. So then you can see, okay, student X has all 4 tests, student Y has all 4 tests, and they can verify it themselves as a preliminary. Of course, whoever's submitting the data, in this case me, I'm going to check that. So yes, SQL reports is definitely a helpful tool if that's something you subscribe to.
And then there's Alyssa's question, which I believe yes is the answer to that. We do have PowerSchool districts that also said they're going to just basically download the state template and upload that. So I'm assuming that should work just fine. PowerSchool will create the template just like the Excel example. I think that's about it for questions.
Yeah, I
In the
don't,
chat, did I miss any?
so there's another one that I think, Erica, sorry, this came up, updating the CPFA assessment setup won't affect teachers already entered, correct? Yeah, that's, Karen, that's correct, that there's
That's
a
correct.
behind the scenes script that's being run to adjust for that.
Correct.
Yeah, data is not affected.
So the submission execution mode is used for what exactly? I think, Karen, that's for you.
Yeah, so there's the validate mode and the submission mode. So when you run the report on PowerSchool and you run validate, and let's just say I run it today and I have 100 students with various tests and I see all them. And next week, my teachers work on entering more data, and I run it again next Friday, and I have and I run it, I will get 200 students because I had 100 from this week and 100 for next week. If I ran it this week in submission mode, it would assume that you had uploaded that to the state and you were starting fresh again next week. So next week, I would have 100 in this file and only 100 in next week. So you certainly can choose to do that if you want. And I believe you could send up the records in piecemeal if you wanted to upload 100 now and then, more next week. Is that correct, Abe and Ray? You could keep sending up smaller batches, correct?
Yes, you can. I think part of what I'm just projecting, I think what PowerSchool is trying to avoid here is you took down that 100 records and you loaded them to the department site, and then you downloaded another file next week and it still include that first 100, and then you loaded that to it's going to cause all kinds of errors in our system because that you've already recorded a result for that combination of student and SACID. So now it's saying, hold a second, we already have that kid and test. So now that caused an error. So then you'd have 100 errors. So by doing it that way, they avoid that possibility. The problem being, if you're needing to look at the file, if you use their execution mode, you've now lost the ability to work with that file.
Right. So you may want to run it in validation mode, kind of wait until you really think your teachers are done. Look at the file. You may want to look for duplicates on your own before you upload it, because it's going to kick out on their end. And you could have a child in 2 PE classes that the teachers didn't know and both scored, and you're going to have to solve that issue, because I believe the file will throw an error when you send it to the state. Correct? If you have the same child for the same test twice, that would be an error.
Yes.
So I personally, what we intend to do is run it in validation mode until we really feel all the scores are in. There aren't going to be changes. Look at the file, make sure it looks accurate, complete. There aren't duplicates, or we solve for any duplicates, and then run it in submission mode and upload it to the state. So there's a comment about medically exempt.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not entirely sure of the question, but I'll try to address it here. So medically exempt typically should not be used it should not be used frequently, essentially. And I think in the past it was a frequently used way to handle students. It's handled similarly to our other summative assessments now, where basically if a student is medically unable to attend school throughout the testing period, then they would be a code 13. So if I was out, temporarily and couldn't test, that would be simply the did not participate code. But if I'm out genuinely due to a medical issue and unable to attend school throughout that testing period, then I would be a code 13.
I do want to mention also, if your teachers had already entered scores and override scores, and they used one of the built-in scores, I think it's medically excused instead of medically exempt. It will, when you run the report, it will translate to the medically exempt or whatever the override score should be that closely matches that. So you don't have to go in and fix all those. You can double check it, and but it should be pretty good.
And one more thing I wanted to add, people were having errors that would say undefined when uploading their CSV report into the state portal. And it's important that you don't have any trailing white space or any kind of unnecessary white space in the file that could throw off parsing the file.
So there's another question about medically exempt students. And those, again, I think that scenario would be where a student, you have 3 subtests completed, and then if something happens to a student and they would qualify for a medical exemption, 13, yeah, you would simply, you would enter that as a code, and then, although we haven't made these decisions officially downstream for accountability purposes, we'll likely have that student would be counted as medically exempt because they couldn't make it for that one subtest. How do we input information about an alternate assessment? That would be the code 12 if you needed to use that, Danielle. Okay, I think we're hitting up right against the hour, so I want to, I just want to add the, first of all, thank you to my colleagues, Chris and Karen, for coming this afternoon. We appreciate your expertise and sharing with us, and Ray, thank you. And then thank you to all of you who attended and taking time out of your Friday afternoon. If you need anything, here's our contact information for Ray and myself, and then also for Karen and Chris, it's here. Feel free to email us, Karen and Chris. Sorry if I cause emails for you here, but that's part of the package, I guess. So, so thank you very much, and we'll call it a webinar at almost exactly 3:30, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Have a good
Take
weekend.
care. Thank you.